Thank you so much, Ole. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I think we can do better than that. We're here to build the economy, change lives, and make sure that we see shape shifters evolving in terms of the South Africans that have been on the video. So, a very good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Fantastic. That's the energy that we want. Again, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And of course, as has been introduced, is our esteemed panel who will be giving us some insight into a very critical conversation that we will be holding today, ladies and gentlemen. One where each of you play a critical role in terms of how South Africans, you and I, really, beyond the numbers, and the loved ones and colleagues and employees that we work with, ultimately see a different dynamic in terms of the future that they're trying to build. And when it comes to money, it's often been said that it doesn't buy you happiness, but it gives you options. And essentially, that's what we're trying to ensure that retirees in South Africa have. That Pam and many others like her can have options as to what they do with their time, what resources they're able to tap into with their wealth, and most importantly, understanding the journey that we need to embark upon to get them there. Now, as has been mentioned, Ole, you might have forgotten Nzwa's name, but I know you know the importance of his work and the function, and most importantly of Sanlam Corporate. And Nzwa, I'm reminded of a conversation that we had 3 months ago on the back of the data that was shared by the Age of Confidence. And of course, we will hear insight into this in a presentation a little later on today. But what was so critical with the audience that we typically speak to is that everyone was flabbergasted by how long it would take for them to actually work to live a life of comfortable retirement, age 80. And I believe that that's a number that really needs to sit in the back of our minds as many South Africans. But what's critical for us, perhaps, as we deep dive into the conversation and get quick responses from many of our panelists over the next 35 minutes, is for us perhaps just to take 2 steps back and go back to an understanding of the importance of retirement. Perhaps making it sexy again, especially where we see a shift in the workplace dynamic where millennials and Gen Zs now make up the bulk of the workforce.
Yeah. Great, thanks Gugu, and good morning, everyone. I guess, from our side, one of the challenges we've always had when we track the period or the ages that people start interacting with our tools and checking their net replacement ratios, it's usually closer to retirement. And what's happened now, you've got this shift where you've got a lot of younger members that are part of our umbrella fund. So how do we make it relevant to a 25-year-old to understand that as much as retirement age is 65, it is still going to happen, and it's a decision that they make today which will impact their ultimate net replacement ratio. So some of the aspects that we're looking at is not only targeted communication, but I think an important one that I'll talk to in my presentation is that education that needs to happen at much earlier stage. Because people really, they don't care about retirement when they start working at age 25. It's something that's so far away. And that's why I was quite excited about the route we took with this campaign. I've presented quite a few times at Benchmark, and every single time, all we've spoken about is net replacement ratio of 20 to 25%, and we explain what that is. For a lot of people, they still don't understand what that means, even though we explain that it's 25% of your final salary that you'll earn as a pension. But when you say to someone that's younger and is working and is 25 years old, that you're actually going to work until the age of 80. And that advert that you see about retirement, which is you on a yacht and sipping champagne, won't happen until they're actually 80. Maybe that angle that we've taken now will actually resonate with the younger people. 100%. So I think it's a different approach that we need to take as an industry in terms of how we get younger people to start making the right decisions today, which ultimately impact their future lives.
100%. I'm glad you highlight that, the difference in the approach, of course, enhancing education. But if there's anything that we've all witnessed as key industry players, is that the retirement industry has seen a lot of shifts. We've called for reform. We've called for heightened education. We've called for increased awareness. And truth be told, have we not seen it? There have been some shifts that have taken place, but I do think as we reflect on some of the numbers regarding two-part, if I'm not mistaken, the last figures quoted by Sanlam Corporate at the end of 2024 was withdrawals upwards of 1.6 billion rand. We continue to see the figures that were just quoted by Kanyisa highlighting the financial strain that South Africans are actually under, focusing on side hustles, not having emergency savings. This obviously tells us that we need to do something more and something different in Zwa from an industry-wide approach that probably speaks to multi-pronged partnerships as well to see this shift. I'm keen for you to share your thoughts on this one, and voter, feel free to add if you have some comments too.
Yeah, so again, one of the questions that's come through at the back of this campaign, and Kanyisa touched on it, is whose responsibility is it to solve this? And I think from our side, where we've landed, internally around these discussions, that it has to be a collaborated effort across all stakeholders. And when we say all stakeholders, that involves government. You've spoken to the role that they play, employers, joint forums, but most importantly, I think the advisors that mostly sit in this room, given that they've got that direct interaction with employers as well as members, and they are a trusted voice. So I think that's why we have these types of sessions, to make sure that there's alignment between what we are doing and how we are thinking of things in the product house versus what's actually happening on the ground with advisors or chatting directly to members. You can have a bunch of actuaries, of which we've got many at Sanlam, building all sorts of models and building all sorts of solutions. But if you're out of touch with what's actually happening and what members need, I think there's always going to be that disconnect in terms of solving this crisis that needs to be solved as soon as possible. So that's sort of where we stand at the moment.
100% voted?
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt about the research, and in conversation with clients that they're telling us that they are financially stretched and therefore financially stressed. So they're worried about things like longevity risk, inflation, cost of healthcare and so forth, which are very valid for most South Africans.
Yeah.
On a second component of that is how we communicate with people, and they say to us they want it to be simplistic. And I mean, Zwart touched on it, where we were talking about replacement ratios, and yet people don't get it. So we communicate, but communication is only effective as what the person on the other side is hearing. So with the retirement age of 80, I think it became more pertinent as to what the real issue is. And I just picture on a lighter note myself getting on that yacht he's talking about with a kiri because I'm too old to get on. Those are the type of realities that people are seeing. But I think on a more serious note is we need to put a lot of emphasis in communicating in a way that people can hear.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important component for us.
Got you. And I think that's an important one for us to actually hold on to. And if I may just jump on that in terms of communication, maybe just expand on it a lot more. Because as you say, we've got individuals in the room who are at that touch point of finding that balance with the employer and the employee. What heightened level of role does need to take place in terms of that communication? We've got the number 80, but certainly it seems as though we need to add more aspects to it just to ensure that the message really does hit home.
So if I can elaborate perhaps on the role that the employer can play.
Yes.
I think the first component of that is they need to make use of the data that's available. Data tells you a lot of things. It tells you, if you analyze something like data when people take their money, what does it say to you? And if you take those data points, how can you move those specific data points? A second component I think that's very valuable is the active role in employers driving a culture change, a culture change of wellness. I think people need to understand illness costs money. And it not only costs money today, but it has a long-term effect on your retirement fund as well. If you have to pay a bigger premium for disability, you save less for retirement. So these type of things are connected. And then lastly, I think it's important to leverage trusted partners. And I think what is a trusted partner? I think the first component of a trusted partner is someone that really cares. So it needs to come from a good place. And then secondly, make the relevant tools available, things like the campaign we're having about 80, that actually clients need to say, okay, I get it. So what do we now do about that?
100%. I want us to touch on the health component in just a moment, and we'll come to you for that, Jared, because if there's anything that we are witnessing is that health does play a higher level of priority. We're even seeing it from many of the healthcare firms. Just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Netcare or Life Healthcare, highlighting that they're boosting their level of investment within mental health care facilities. And if you consider the fact that one of the biggest drivers for mental health concerns is financial, there's a very important link that we need to find there.
Definitely.
But I do want us to come back to that age dynamic, and maybe let's come back to you here, Dani, just to highlight and, of course, even emphasize even further, on the back of the data and information that we continue to review in terms of that information. And as voters said, making sure that information hits us in our face, the reduction of that age from 80 to 65. I'm told that 1 in 4 South Africans would be able to retire comfortably. So looking around the room, I'm not too sure which part of the numbers we all sit on, but maybe share your perspective as to how we need to heighten the level of emphasis in the reduction of the retirement age for us to do so and achieve that financially and successfully so.
No, thank you. So, assuming the members contribute enough, that's always the first question. Then I think the other important thing to make sure that members have a confident or successful retirement outcome is just to avoid the three big or killer investment mistakes that members often make. The first one is we call reckless conservatism. We've all seen that people think they're being conservative, but then they invest in cash for a 20, 30-year period. And that's just reckless. Your investors are not going to keep track with inflation.
It might have done well in April, though, with all the drama.
Short periods of time. I mean, long term, I'm willing to debate that one. And then, also, members tend to overreact and panic when there's a market crash, climbing out of the market, and then if I get to climb back in, disinvesting at the wrong time. So for those reasons, it's quite important. All retirement funds have default options. Those need to be appropriate, and members need to be aware of them and use them. That's quite important. And just to touch on that, a mistake that most members are making at the moment is they're not considering the trustee-endorsed annuity strategies. So all retirement funds have to have a trustee-endorsed annuity strategy. It's institutionally priced, so you get the good price and all of that. Most members don't even look at that. They go to the retail market, buy the same annuity at the retail price, and pay a lot more for it. So just to put it in a different way, if you want to buy, let's say, an inflation-linked annuity, you can pay up to 10% more. So turn it around. Your income you're going to get every year for the rest of your life is 10% less than what it could have been. I mean, that's just criminal. So I think the important thing is for trustees, joint forums and consultants is to ensure that there's appropriate default options available. And we have a wide range in the Sanlam Umbrella Fund. And that people know about the defaults and especially know about the trustee-endorsed annuity strategy. That will help members retire with confidence and hopefully many years before they actually reach 80, they can afford to do so.
100%. And I think that's critical that you mentioned. And perhaps just to go back to some of the technical language that you used there in a moment, I'm trying to think of a 45-year-old relative who would sit and say, trustee-endorsed retirement annuity. Yeah. We might know what it means in the room, but that's also part of the languaging, right? That also needs to shift in terms of how it lands with the consumer base.
No, definitely. And I think the most important thing is most members don't even know these options are available. Yeah. And I think that's the concern. And despite many resources being available, people don't often go out and look for it. We need to go to them in their space or where they what to communicate in and communicate those options to them as voters mentioned.
Yeah, 100%. Voted, I want to come back to you in just a moment, especially taking a look at the dynamic of the consumer that we need to look at. Health has been brought up, retirement as a priority has certainly come up, ensuring that we educate them effectively and share the necessary messaging with them. But of course, we do need to look at a consumer and individual from a 360 approach, understanding their retirement needs, risk, and of course, investment goals and objectives that they also might have. I'm keen to understand your thinking around what it is that we need to see shift within the industry to ensure that we meet all of these needs, much like we saw in the video, to ensure that we meet all consumers' needs fully in terms of the solutions that are provided, but also how we communicate that to them.
Absolutely. I think the first step, again, back to data. I think we sit with a lot of data that we don't necessarily effectively use. I think Sanlam is the leader in that we look at, as an example, the benchmark research that we've done is telling us a lot of things. Members are telling us a lot of things. And I think we can use that data very effectively. So that's the first one. I think the second one is human-centered design, where we literally talk to clients and say, co-design solutions with us, rather than imposing things on people, because people just don't go along with you telling them what to do. But if you can put a solution on the table that they believe is a problem to them and they help co-design the solution, that's a very different mindset. And then lastly, I think behavioral nudges is how can we nudge a person in the right direction, because often people intuitively know what's good for them, but they actually don't have clear direction. And if you can meet them where they are and then take them on a journey to a place that's better for them, letting them see that vision, I think that makes a big difference.
100%. Gerard, this is where you come in, meeting people where they are. And you do that so effectively in terms of the work that you do at Afrocentric. And I think it's important to pull that in. Where are people in terms of their mindset, their health, and how do we ensure that the necessary conversations that have been highlighted by your peers on the panel do come through to the solutions then that are provided not only by the industry, but other stakeholders as well?
Yeah, thanks, Gugu. And again, good morning, everybody. It's actually quite scary if you just reflect on the mental health issue and the impact it has on overall workplace productivity. What we see in our universe, for instance, is that year on year, we've seen a 25% increase in hospitalization due to mental health for people under the age of 35.
Repeat that number again, Sarah.
25% year-on-year increase
Sure.
for people under the age of 35. Now, what's even more scary is that we know that this is significantly underreported because of the stigma still associated with mental health. So that could be well double, if not more, in terms of what the true extent of it is. And for us in the room, thinking about that impact from a workplace perspective, you're already dealing with productivity challenges, absenteeism challenges. But now, as a result of this, you're dealing with what we refer to as presenteeism, where people are actually present but mentally burned out or disengaged. And it's estimated that the true impact of mental health in the workplace on the South African economy is actually close to about 4% of GDP. And so that really gives you a grounding perspective of how big this is. It's a silent epidemic. Yeah. And I think we need to acknowledge and deal with it from that perspective. But coming back to what I'm listening in terms of the real age of retirement and how that impacts healthcare, I think we need to have this conversation as well. Essentially, Google, what it then means is that people retiring at a later age just places more increase on already burdened private and public healthcare system as it relates to resources and funding. And we believe that this real age of retirement will likely just lead to an increase in cost across the board. If you think about it, yes, it's all good and well and positive that people will contribute more towards healthcare expenditure. But what it does also mean on the flip side is there will be a higher demand for healthcare services, and this will put financial strain on all of us in the room, whether it is, a scheme, an insurer, an employer, or an employee, as it comes to the financial strain. And I think where it becomes real then as a result of people working longer is that people will develop more chronic conditions before retirement. And for us on the healthcare provider side, on funding side, what it then means is we're going to deal with more claims for longer periods. Now, I guess you can argue that we can price for these claims. True. I mean, if there's an increase in utilization, in hospitalization, in chronic medication, one could price for it, but who pays for it? It's the member. It will come through in increased contributions, and that's less money towards retirement.
100%.
And I think maybe just in summary around that point, just so that it lands really for what it is in terms of the impact, is that unfortunately in some instances it will go even further than that, because then we might also have to really look benefit design. And that has the potential downstream impact of people having to pay for more out-of-pocket expenses that can't be covered because it's now not sustainable anymore to keep up with a higher demand in healthcare cost that's required. But I guess all of these things also spell opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to quickly make that point, and that is it really, for us as a managed care organization, forces us to accelerate, value-based care as a solution to these challenges. Yes, we need to work in a more integrated fashion to actually bring down the real age of retirement, and I think that's important, and that's where we think health and risk and retirement will play a significant role to do that. But ultimately, what we should also be doing now is to say, how do we actually deal with the issue in a more sustainable, innovative way? If you think about it, people who, in South Africa, 30% of people over the age of 65 live with chronic pain that's associated with lower back, arthritis, osteoporosis, and other musculoskeletal type diseases. And that is one of the highest prevalences of chronic conditions amongst members in any type of cohort you look at. So if we can now bring in solutions like value-based care that moves us from transactional into more of a partner-based solution, we can now deal with that overutilization in a more effective way and directly bring down the cost of healthcare and put more money or dispose more money for people to actually bring down the cost of retirement through their retirement contribution. So I think quite impactful in that regard,
Gotcha.
And it requires a rethink completely, Google.
Definitely a rethink and, of course, a new approach to how it is that we approach, see this dynamic and source for solutions. And you've touched on so many key figures that I think are critical for us to be mindful of in terms of those stats regarding mental health care. And as much as it might appear as though those figures are largely towards those under the age of 35, the truth is we see the physical manifestation of some of those, for frustrations and ailments physically when it comes to the older generation. And as you've mentioned, that largely does lead to chronic conditions. But what you have touched on here, Gerard, I think is so important because you said it requires a rethink. And this definitely means that it almost needs, a reconfiguration of the ecosystem to ensure that insurers, healthcare providers, wellness, of course, retirement savings, and of course, risk is also covered in terms of speaking to the full needs of the South African consumer. And Sanlam, this is where you come in. And maybe you can, together with Gerard, share some of your thoughts and sentiments here regarding what shifts do need to take place within that ecosystem and changes that fundamentally need to be implemented in order to see a better outcome for the consumer.
Yeah, thanks, Gugu. Morning, everyone. I think in terms of when you start thinking about, we're talking about a whole lot of product sets here. So we're talking about retirement, we're talking about risk, we're talking about health. I think as providers and also the advice community, we still think too much in products. If we want to think ecosystem, we talk about integration, right? We've been talking about integration in this industry for a long time. But if you really want to integrate in a way that serves the member and that speaks to some of these underlying problems like mental health issues and so on, you need to not put a whole lot of products next to each other, list those products and try and explain them to people. You need to integrate the touch points. So the touch point, what I mean here by a touch point is where the member interacts with that product set. Group risk benefits are interesting in terms of touch points because, as everyone in this room knows, the touch points are very infrequent. So it's that complete crisis that happens in the family. It's when someone died in the family or when a very serious health event, way beyond a medical aid event, when a serious health event happens, that's when the touch point happens, right? For most of our working community, we hope that those touch points won't happen during their working life, although if we're talking retirement age 80, they will. So the challenge with group risk benefits is the touch points are very few and far between. But when you start integrating this product set, when you talk about integrating health products, integrating wellness offerings, and then starting to integrate that with your disability benefits and your severe illness benefits and so on, what happens when you start integrating a member's health management with their risk benefits is you have the opportunity for those touch points to happen much earlier. Where I think we need to go as a provider community and where Sanlam Corporate is also trying to go is to make sure that we build our ecosystems and our background information and data in such a way that we can, at that first touch point, when someone engages with us around a health management event, we can start seeing the whole member and thinking about them as a whole member. And also then use the opportunities to start talking to them about where we can intervene, where we can help, where they might end up, if it's disability, start educating on those benefits. And if we can do that, if we can pull that data and that conversation together at an integrated touch point, then we will be able to really make a difference to members, to actually have a conversation with them that can change the course of events.
What you're highlighting here is just reminding me of the opening video we saw of the gentleman who mentioned that his mother had cancer. Yeah. And he himself is actually trying to ensure that he provides for his family. So again, ensuring that that touch point hits a personal note close to home, which speaks to how this information is further filtered down right to the client and the consumer.
Yes, so imagine that gentleman phoned, he's anxious about this, about cancer in his family, and he phones his employer's wellness program. Imagine someone can have a conversation with him at that point saying, okay, this is what you should do from an intervention point of view, the intervention benefits that are covered under your medical aid. And by the way, do you know that you do actually have cancer cover under your employer's benefit type? So if the worst should happen, immediately you intervene on the mental health as well. But you cannot have that conversation unless your touch points are properly enabled for it. Because we deal with big employers and big groups, and you need to have that information in front of you and have the proper integration that backs it.
Let's talk on those touch points. Gerald, I want you to add your thoughts here. How do we, emphasize this and accentuate it to ensure that it's accessible?
Yeah, and I think this is absolutely powerful what Sanmarie is mentioning, because for me, really, this intersection of health, risk, retirement is the opportunity to really build out what we are referring as the age of confidence. But it requires exactly those two things. It's one, strategic integration, but also buy-in from all stakeholders. in terms of the advice element, the employer, the funder, and the insurer. I think that's critical because if you get it right, it comes back to Wouter's point around the shared data insights.
Yes.
And that's critical because now what it allows us to do is to actually then bring together solutions that speak to, okay, what's tailored for the workplace that makes sense based on the data and the insights we're seeing. That's quite proactive in that regard. But it also then speaks to how do we solution around risk-rated health interventions. And this for me is critical because it's about moving the inflection point of value away from the disease is now here, let's deal with it, let's treat it, to actually how do we prevent it. Because if we have the data sets and we work in a collaborative, integrated way, we can actually deliver on that care continuum from prevention and wellness to actually the disease management, and then ultimately, obviously, hopefully drive the sustainability of it. Last point, just I think to what Sanmarie is mentioning, that is quite critical in how we solution and then deliver on this. For me, it speaks to how do we ultimately then ensure that the member is empowered.
Yes.
And it speaks to everything you've tied to the conversation earlier around communication, awareness, knowledge. But for us, from a healthcare perspective, members can't be passive in the decisions around their health journey. They need to be active participants, and it calls for less of a fragmentation in how we deliver care and more of a collaborative approach that also takes into consideration the member's voice and making sure they're empowered. And I think if we can bring those elements together, Gugu, really what we are building here at Sanlam Corporate to deliver the age of confidence is a reality sooner rather than later.
100%. This gets me excited because we're hearing all the right solutions, right? And we understand the kind of partnership that is required, not only in terms of the regulatory shifts that we do need to see within the industry. We've got the product solution and development from key organizations and institutions, riding out the wave and the investment trends despite the volatility. We've got the insurance ensuring that there's ongoing interaction and the prioritization of the healthcare of the employee and customer at the end of the day. And we hear this word come up consistently, the integration. This might be an unfair question, but who leads this? Because at some point, when you come with a solution and another partner comes with a solution, as we've witnessed, when there's differing opinions, there often leads to some conflict there. Let's get your feedback here, Nzwa. Sanmarie, well, it's open to the panel, really.
I can add on this one. I think if I look at...
He wants to lead this.
If I look at some of the stats that we've seen come through via the benchmark research, there's a call from employers around this holistic value proposition, more so after COVID, where they wanted to incorporate healthcare. So we spent a long time only discussing retirement benefits, net replacement ratios, our admin platform, and never really focused on how we integrate healthcare. I think from our side, given the rise in umbrella funds, commercial umbrella funds, and the consolidation that's happening in the industry with standalone funds closing down, we still think that the winner in this umbrella fund space is that player that's going to integrate and have this holistic value proposition that makes sense for advisors. Something that they can take to employers, which incorporates risk, incorporates retirement, incorporates the in-fund benefits, and incorporates healthcare. So I think from our side as Sanlam Corporate, we need to lead this in conjunction with advisors. And in conjunction with advisors, the back of the comment that's been made where they are closer to the members, they understand the solutions that are being asked for. We cannot just solution on this side. It has to be, some sort of partnership with advisors. But through umbrella funds, I think that's the gateway into all these products. So what you see as a member is that you see that I'm a member of Umbrella Fund X, but what's at the back end is a holistic employee benefits value proposition. So I think that's obviously I'm Mr. Umbrella Fund, so I would say that.
Yes.
But that's sort of where we see the industry going, and the winner will be whoever gets that right, and that's what we're trying to do with Gerald.
Got you. Wouter, go ahead.
I just want to add to it. I think if you look at a member, what I think our industry has been lacking to a large extent pre this integration discussion is that we saw problems in isolation and we wanted to solve it in isolation. Where you deal with a human, finances has an impact on your mental health, that has an impact on, that has an impact on. I think one shift that I would like to see in the industry is the role that intermediaries are playing. Because I too often still hear intermediaries saying, but I'm a retirement fund specialist, so that's what I'm focusing on. And that may be good and well. I'm not saying everyone needs to be a specialist in everything, but you need to service your client holistically. That means you need to partner with someone else that can fill in the gap.
Yeah.
I cannot see that you'll be able to service a client long term by dealing with a component of the wellness of a member. It has to be a shift in the thinking of corporates like ourselves, as well as intermediaries, so that we can impact on the solution that clients need.
Got you. Sanmarie?
Yes, maybe the question you asked there was, who should lead the integration.
Yeah.
I think all the parties have got a role to play. The thing to note about integration is it's complex. It's not easy to get this right.
Yeah.
So, because if you just place products next to each other and you talk about them together, all you're doing is cross-selling, right?
Yeah.
So you're not doing integration. Integration requires, unfortunately, systems enablement. So where that member touches you, you need to be able to see all their information. Now, the companies, the providers, from a provider side, who are in the best position to give an integrated solution set are the big providers, like Sanlam Corporate. So you can see the people here. We've got all of those tools in our arsenal. That also means that we've got big systems and big IT architecture ecosystems in the background.
Gotcha.
And you have to do the work to integrate those properly so that where that member touches you, you don't actually pass them around and talk to them about just one thing at a time. So we need to get really good at having a functional integration layer in our systems so that we can give life to the conversation, not just talk about it, but actually give it, put it in place in such a way that our members can experience it.
100%.
And then I just want to mention one other aspect here that we haven't talked about, and that's also the trust. We know there's data privacy, and people sometimes don't want to give their data around. We've got a long road to walk in terms of member trust, especially with mental health challenges in the environment. People want to reach out. They want to get help from a wellness program. They want to find out what cover they've got in their medical aid and what cover they might have if things get really bad. They don't want their employer to know about that. Yeah. And we need to build the processes and the trust with our members so that we can have these conversations with them, but without actually heightening their anxiety in the process.
Got you, 100%. And I believe, Jared, perhaps that's a point that you can also underscore in terms of walking that journey with the client to ensure that they understand it's not just a retirement conversation, it's not just a risk conversation, but here are the dynamics here to enlighten you on this journey, but also ensure that the trust is there. Don, feel free to add.
Most definitely, and I'll just quick point on that. I think just quickly on the mental health thing, and that's critical for us as a collective, especially those that sit in front of the client and the client themselves, is mental health is a disease, and we need to start with destigmatizing it the same way we've done successfully over the last 3 decades around HIV and AIDS. And we can achieve the same results if we start with that underpin of building our systems and processes in such a way that enhances and amplifies trust so that people can engage on the programs that are effective and meaningful to help address that issue. But just coming back to who builds this, I think we really are at a intersection where we have optionality. It starts with the data and the insights. Yeah. And from that alone, the conversation is already enriched, whether it's in front of the advisor, with the advisor, over the phone, through an interaction, still potentially in a silo with the product houses. But I think that's critical. Secondly, we're really at an exciting juncture as the Sanlam Group in how we are looking at developing reward systems and rewards platforms and loyalty programs that I think will become a key enabler to bring us as product houses into an ecosystem where we can engage with the client more meaningfully and across products and across opportunities. So that's important. And then to Sanmarie's point around the actual layer of integration that speaks to the complexities of our various systems. So it's not a challenge that we can't overcome. I think it's one that we are really driving and putting a lot of things in place to solution for. We have no other choice. Yep. The reality in our world, Gugu, is that already as it stands today, without knowing this increase in retirement age, is that a third of the people we care for, and there's 4 million of them, a third of them contribute to 76% of the healthcare cost in the system. And so if they then retire later and they place additional burden, this just becomes worse. So we have no choice. If we want to make this relevant and sustainable, we need to drive integration and overcome the complexities.
100%. Dani, your thoughts?
Yes, I just wanted to step back to, I think, a point that Nzwa and Sunmarie made about, we have the data, we can build the system and all of that, but really the person who can be the hero in the story is the advisor, because they do know the client better. And I engage a lot of, provide investment feedback to joint forums, and you can immediately see 3 or 4 minutes into the meeting which advisors are adding value. They know their client, they get things done, and others where you basically feel you need to introduce the client to the advisor. And unfortunately, you have both. And it's really something we need to work at as an industry.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I think we have a lot of good consultants in the industry, and hopefully they will grow and help more of the clients.
Definitely. If that's not a call to action, I don't know what more is. But I do want us to just share some of the concluding remarks from each of you as panelists, because what you've highlighted throughout the last 30 minutes are really very critical insights that we need to be mindful of. There's a harsh reality that we're facing as South Africans, and that's been underscored by the data, the information, and the presentations that will be shared throughout the course of today. We also clearly understand that the information and insights that is shared by this data and information is what we need to make use of. It sets the roadmap ahead for us to understand what interventions need to be incorporated in an integrated manner to ensure that we meet the needs of the clients from a 360 point of view. One thing is quite clear is that we do understand that key stakeholders are all on board to make sure that we address this particular need and concern, but we definitely need to move with speed, with accuracy, and most importantly, with the customer and the client and their needs as our end goal in mind. You've all taken us, on a journey on understanding just the complexities, but more so the opportunity that does exist. But fundamentally, what we do want is to shift the needle. In 10 years' time, we'll be 10 years older, closer to 80, given that that's the target that many of us need to reach. But we're also looking to not only reach closer to a senior level of age, but reducing the age of retirement. That is the priority. I'm going to challenge each of you as our panelists, 30 seconds or less. What commitment can you make within the industry and the stakeholder group that you represent to ensure that we shift the needle forward in reducing the age of retirement in South Africa and ensuring that we have a heightened level of retirement success in the country for our customers and clients and ourselves? Nzwa, umbrella funds, tell us more about the new surprises you'll be bringing forward, as you mentioned.
No, I guess, for us, Kanyisa touched on it. The ultimate goal is improve member retirement outcomes, and you want as many people to retire with dignity. It should not be a luxury just for the few in terms of retirement. And I think how we are thinking about it from a product perspective is to see what else can we add as value-added benefits, what other partnerships can we include within the umbrella fund that will help with reducing this age from 80 to 65, 63, 60. I think that's really the conversation that's happening. The issues that we've faced in this industry haven't changed for a very long time. It's low savings rates, it's lack of preservation. Two-Pot will address that, but it won't move the needle fast enough to get to the crisis that we're in now. So what are the other opportunities that we need to look at? I think a big one that's been touched on by not only Kanyisa but some of the panelists today is this issue around financial literacy and education. That one is a role that can be played by all the key stakeholders that exist within our industry. And I think that education drive, if members understand the impact of the decisions that they make today, if we empower members with the right knowledge, the right tools, we will probably see better behavior, which will ultimately improve retirement outcomes in the future. I think that's one that we'll call low-hanging fruit from our side.
100%. Sanmarie, commitment you can make?
So to reducing the retirement age from 80.
Yes.
Group Risk will continue to do what Group Risk does, which is protecting our breadwinners, who are incredibly important in South African society, given the number of people who rely on them, protecting them from having not only their retirement savings completely derailed, but also having their lives derailed by a risk event. Because these things happen to families, and if you don't have protection against them, when you become disabled or when close family members die, then your retirement savings will be derailed and 80 will probably go up and become never. So we will continue to do that with passion and with diligence and with care and with market-leading products and make sure that we protect breadwinners' ability to earn.
100%, especially in an economy like ours that still struggles with high levels of unemployment. Voter.
When Gerald talk about technology and the things that we are building, I want to sit on the edge of my
Go
chair
ahead.
because I'm so excited about what's coming in the Sanlam Group. If you look at what we're doing through our fintech colleagues, I wish we had the time and place to tell you about all of that, but all in good time. So
But
I think this
AI
whole
is working to our
integration,
benefit.
yeah, I think this whole integration thing is coming our way, which will be awesome for our industry. But I think from a secondary, what can we do? I think what's important for us is to know that we're all accountable. And what that means is if we walk away here, we can't just come and listen to a talk like this. We all sound very clever and intellectual. We go away from here and we do exactly what we've done yesterday.
Yeah.
If we do not walk away here thinking conversations around the table needs to start changing, then things are not changing. You cannot go sit around the table and talk about how quick a claim is paid. That cannot lead discussions at a client's table. This type of how does things impact, what the data points is, how do we change it, do we change discussions, and how do you then engage with providers to enable that type of change? I think those are the type of things that we need to talk to, and that's my commitment.
100%. Dani?
On the investment side, time is a resource. You need to invest for a long enough time to have your money in retirement. So we can commit from our side that while your money is invested with us, we'll look after it passionately, irrespective of Trump, irrespective of tariffs, all of that. But if you're going to start withdrawing your money every year, your two-part withdrawal, even if you don't need the money, our investments and what we can do cannot make up for that. And I think that's a good, important point.
Time in the market, not timing the market, right? Gerald?
Gugu, the managed care organization commits to focus on strengthening and deepening our clinical innovation and then to integrate meaningfully with risk and retirement, because our role is to go the opposite direction of where we want the retirement age to go. We want to increase health span.
Yes.
So we want people to live healthier for longer, way past retirement and as close to their lifespan. And to do that, we are focusing single-mindedly on clinical innovation. And that's our commitment.
100%. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard it all. For increasing financial education, protecting breadwinners, technology being used to ensure that we enhance the level of integration and accountability from all stakeholders. Time in the market versus timing the market, staying invested for the long term, and of course improving our health span by enhancing healthcare innovation, clinical innovation. A big thank you to our panelists for having joined us this morning. I trust that you've all walked away with key nuggets and insights that have not only left you a lot more informed, but maybe even intrigued, so that you yourself ask yourself and your colleagues and your peers as you leave here this morning, what can we do differently on the back of what was presented here today? So that fundamentally this conversation is one of consequence, that in a year's time, in 10 years' time, will have shifted the radar in terms of making sure that more South Africans can retire comfortably. Nzwa, Sanmarie, Wouter, Dani, and Gerald, thank you so much for making time for this panel. Please give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we make our way off stage and hand back to Olivia.